Bashalia, and I'm an artist and a teacher. I received my undergraduate degree from Brandeis University in studio art in 2012, which I then followed up with a post-baccalaureate certificate in 2013, and then went on to the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Tufts to receive my master's in fine art in 2015. It wasn't until my sophomore or junior year of my undergraduate program that I took my first printmaking course, and I absolutely fell in love with it. Despite my main focus being painting at the time, I always tried to find ways to incorporate printmaking into my practice, whether that was making studies for paintings, or now, with my latest method, I try to incorporate printmaking, painting, drawing, and collage all into one piece of artwork. As I mentioned, I'm also a teacher. I teach 7th through 12th grade art in West Newton, Mass, and in the summers, I teach adult drawing intensive courses at the Museum of Fine Arts in the galleries. If you'd like to check out some of the artwork that I make, you can do that at erinbashalia.com or follow me on Instagram. Today's lesson is in at-home printmaking, specifically making a trash bag monoprint. A monoprint is when you make a single print by transferring paint or ink from one surface to paper. In this case, our surface is going to be a trash bag or a plastic bag, whatever you have laying around at home. And I'll go over a few different ways to actually physically make the print once we get into the demonstration. You might be wondering, okay, if it makes one single print, then what's the point? Why wouldn't you just make a painting? Well, the thing about making monoprints is that there's an element of surprise. You can't predict exactly how each print is going to come out. So they're all a little different from one another. And with the trash bag or plastic bag, you get this really cool textured quality that, again, you can't plan for. To some people, that can be a little bit anxiety producing, not knowing exactly what you're going to get, but it's actually really a lot of fun. The surprises tend to be good, some are bad, but as you work with it, you'll get the hang of it. And the point really is just to have fun. There's not really an exact right way to do it. I'll give you some guidance and some pointers, but the main point of this is for you to play around with the materials and have fun and hopefully create a print or two that you're proud of. I've got a few examples here. So this one I made using multiple layers. So this one took a bit of time and I really layered up. Almost every color you see was done, in a different layer. So that's one. Now this one here was done in like 2 layers. So it's pretty quick. It's a little bit, a little rougher around the edges. So that's another one there. And then this one was done using a subtractive method. So you paint on 1 layer of paint and then you scrape away. So that's where the white is. You scrape away your design and you print from that. So those are a few different things that we will go over once we get into the demonstration. So I wanted us to take a look at a woodblock print done by Yasui Sōtarō. It's called Still Life, Fruit on Tablecloth, and it was done in 1932. Yasui was a Japanese artist who actually left Japan at the age of 19 to go study in France, where he was greatly influenced by Jean-François Millet, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, and Paul Cézanne. At the beginning of World War I, Yasui actually had to return to Japan, and he brought back what he learned while he was in France, and became really well known for developing this version of portraiture. It was called yoga portraiture, which means Western style portraiture. He used clear outlines and rich, vibrant colors while also finding a way to incorporate more traditional Japanese techniques into his work. Now, we're not looking at one of his portraits today. As I said, we're looking at a still life, but it's relevant to what we'll be doing. Now, it's also a different kind of print. This was a woodblock print, which is quite different from a monoprint. But there are really several things about this that lend themselves well to what we'll be doing and that we can use as inspiration. So first, I'd like you to consider the composition. Yasui decided on an aerial view looking down on that fruit. and it's arranged in a diagonal way, so from the bottom left corner to the top right, with each piece of fruit slightly overlapping the next. You're going to create your own still life, so with objects of your choice. They don't have to be fruit, they can be, but it's really up to you what you use. But what I'd like you to do is really think about how you're going to arrange each of those objects on your paper when you get into your print. The next thing to think about and take a look at is his use of color. So there are some really subtle tonal grays that work really nicely against those super vibrant blue, orange, red, yellow, and purple that are in the background and in the fruit. He also uses a little bit of black, but it's done in a very thoughtful way, and it's really just to show off a few details. So there's no limit to the number of colors you can use, but it definitely, this print goes to show that a really thoughtful way of using color goes a long way and produces a lovely result. So just be really thinking about what colors you want to use when you're getting into your print. So last thing we're going to take a look at are Yasui's use of mark making. So he uses pattern and repetitive marks. You can see that in the purple of the grapes and in some of the shadows, and to depict some texture on the pineapple, that lovely like cross-hatching pattern. He also uses some really bold specific shapes to build volume. So if you take a look at that lemon on the left-hand side, there's that really great brownish purple shadow that's just such a succinct, lovely shape, and it gives so much information about how round that lemon is. So when you're getting ready to create your own print, see if you can find ways to incorporate pattern or to break your objects down into more specific shapes. So I know not everybody has all of these things lying around at home, so just do what you can here. But what you're gonna need in order to make this print is some sort of plastic. So that could be saran wrap, it could be a regular grocery bag. Trash bag is ideal because it's nice and big, but use whatever you have. So you'll need one of those. You're going to need some paper. Now, you can use printer paper. It's not super absorbent, so it might take some trial and error to really figure out the best way to use it. If you have higher quality printmaking paper or some better higher weight sketchbook paper, that would be great. You're just gonna wanna have a pile of it. So cut it or tear it to the size that's gonna work for you and have a stack of it ready next to you. You're gonna need some paint brushes. If you've only got one, that's fine. If you've got a variety of sizes, that would be even better. Have those handy. You're also gonna want some Q-tips or a cotton swab, something that you can use to scrape away paint. Even honestly, like your pinky in a paper towel will work. You're gonna need 2 containers of water. So one will be for cleaning your brushes. So that'll be sort of your dirty water, and one clean water that you're gonna use to help wet your paper. So it's important that they stay separate. And of course you're gonna need some paint. So I've got a whole bunch of different kinds of paint here. I've got acrylic paint, which is ideal for this project, but you could use tempera paint. You could make it work with gouache. If you have oil paint, you can use oil paint too. You wouldn't use the water piece. I've got some from Blick and Liquitex. It really doesn't, it doesn't matter. It's whatever you've got lying around at home. We're all trying to just work here with what we've got. And last, you're gonna need paper towel or a rag. And that should do it. We are about ready to get printing here. But the first thing you're going to need to do is choose your still life objects. So I've got myself a potted plant, a pitcher, and a little pepper shaker here. And it's in your best interest to do a sketch of these objects, how you want them arranged beforehand. Here is my sketch. You could also print out an image. You could make a digital sketch and print it out, or if you wanted to print something offline, a photo that you've taken or something like that, that would work as well. So what I'm gonna do with that drawing is actually slide it underneath my trash bag so I can see my plan here. And it's the same size as the paper that I'm gonna print on. So I'll be able to line things up if I wanna print with multiple layers. And I know that it's gonna fit on my paper. So the next thing you're gonna wanna do is get your paint ready. The great thing about working on a large piece of plastic is that it can function as your palette in addition to being your printing surface. So I have squeezed out a whole bunch of paint up on the side of my plastic here, giving me enough space to mix paint and to print in two separate places. Once you have your paint out, I would think about what colors you really want to use. If there's anything there that needs to be altered or mixed, and go ahead and do that beforehand, because once we get into painting and printing, things need to move kind of quickly because acrylic paint tends to dry rather fast. So here's a part where you'd want to think about, relate back to Yasui's print and think about how intentional he was about the colors that he used. He had a few vibrant colors and some more subtle tonal colors, and maybe you want to mimic that, or maybe you're going to go on the total opposite end of the spectrum and just have a super keyed up, bright print. But whatever you choose to do, it's good to kind of be prepared and have some of that ready, while still giving yourself the opportunity to have some spontaneity while you're making your print. All right, now I've got all my paint mixed, so we're ready to go here. Now, one thing that's important to keep in mind is that once we get the paint on to where we're gonna print from, you really need to move quickly because it dries fast. You can mix a little bit of water into it, and if you have a medium that you can mix in and it'll stay wet for longer, great, go ahead and use that. But for the most part, we're just working against the clock. And you don't want to put your paint on too thick because then when you print from it, it's gonna smush out to the sides. So here we go. I am going to use my guidelines here that I have underneath, while at the same time trying to be intentional about my mark making in the same way as we talked about when we were looking at Yasui's print. So I'm just gonna get the basic outline of that shape of the picture and keep moving here. I'm gonna get the big basic structure of all the objects. When you are forced to move quickly like this, unexpected things can happen. When you don't think too hard about how you're making something, it can actually produce really great results. So I've got all my paint down. Now I'm gonna take my clean paper towel or rag. I'm gonna wet it in my clean water. Squeeze most of the water out. I don't want it to be sopping wet. And I wanna make my paper damp. So I'm gonna rub that over the whole surface and then put it damp side down on what I just painted. And I can see the corners of my paper underneath, so I can line it up to make sure it fits. And so I know where everything's gonna be placed. Now I'm gonna use the side of my hand. I've got one hand holding the paper in place, and I'm using the side of my palm to rub the paper. And I want to make sure that I'm rubbing everywhere so that I'm picking up as much paint as possible. And our damp paper should help with that process. It'll help it absorb more. And once I feel like I've gotten the whole thing, I'm gonna peel up my paper. And there we go. So that is my first step in this print. Now, I could leave it here or I could move on. So if I wanted to add more, I can see where everything is placed already. That's the great part. I can just leave it as is and go ahead and add some more to it. So I want to add some stripes to my picture. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I want to add some of that pattern that was on my potted plant. So I'll go ahead and do that as well. And since I can see my paper underneath, I'll be able to re-line up my print. And ideally, things will print where I want them to. So let's see how we do here. I'm gonna line my corners up again. I'm not gonna re-wet my paper because then I'm gonna smudge what I've already got there. And again, I'm gonna rub to pick up the new paint that we just put down. Let's see how we did. All right, so I got some of the pattern picked up on both, and now if there's anything else that I feel like I've missed, I can keep adding and layering to it. That's one of the cool things. I could totally transform this into another print. So that was one way to make a print. Now, like I said, you can keep adding to it, add details, change things around, but there are other ways to make monoprints. So again, nice thing about working on plastic here is it's easy cleanup. So if I want to start fresh, I can take a wet rag and just wipe away the paint that was there and start new. So for this next print, you're going to need those Q-tips or rag or cotton swab. So I'm going to just paint a layer over my whole template here. So I want to use something that's a little bit transparent because I still want to be able to see my design underneath. So again, not putting it down too thick and also not too thin. And once I'm covered, I'm going to grab that Q-tip and pull out my design. It's hard to get that specific with a monoprint, but when you do it like this with a subtractive process, you really can. You could even cut and shape the end of your Q-tip. If it starts to get so that it's not pulling away the paint, you could grab a clean one. I've got a little more paint here, so it's not as much of a time crunch. This is a one and done thing, so anything that I don't get the first time, I can't really pull out again because there won't be any paint to really remove after I've printed from it. Again, I'm going to quickly dampen my paper. You can try it dry. It'll probably be a little more textured, but that's all right. And again, same deal. We want to rub the back of the whole thing. Once it's done, pull it up. There you go. So those white lines tend to stay pretty clean. That's what I mean about being really being able to be specific. You can kind of see the difference between this one here and this one, where there's a little more smushing and my details aren't quite as clear. So it's just a different look. You can combine the two together. So, but those are kind of the two main methods. And now I recommend really just like playing around with it, playing around with colors, seeing how you can combine and layer all sorts of different things. Now that you're familiar with how to make a monoprint, you should ask yourself if you're happy with your color choices, your composition, or your still life objects, and if not, change it up. You should keep playing and experimenting with this, but the really nice thing is that each step is pretty quick and easy, so it doesn't mean you have to do a whole bunch of prep work before you can change something. One thing I wanted to show you was from the print I showed you earlier of my demonstration. The way I got this teal background was to print just a solid block of teal and then essentially do what we did in the first part of the demo over the top of that. So there's so many different ways you can play with these. You can paint or draw on top of them, or maybe you've created a whole bunch of prints where there's only pieces of each that you like. So cut them up and collage them together and make something totally new. If you get to a point where you're sort of running out of ideas, go onto the museum website and take a look at the collection. You can look up prints or paintings or sculpture, whatever is going to inspire you, and get ideas about composition or color or pattern, just like we did when we looked at Yasui's print earlier. And that's all I've got for you today. I hope you had a good time.